Greetings in the name of Jesus. It's a real blessing to be here again, and I've been reminded of just the importance of the decisions we're making today, and how these things affect us, and how important it is to obtain eternal life. And we have many examples in our way back to the beginning of time of the different choices people made, and they ended up having vastly different outcomes. And so today, as we've been reminded, we have our choices to make, and so it's I just like to echo the thought that the important thing is that we can all, if possible, the whole world, all the people in the whole world, but if possible, all of us here, that we have our choices to make. It's our time today. Could we stand for prayer? Heavenly Father, we look to you, and we have no other place to go to, and we just need you in our lives, and we, in our human strength, want to serve you and give our lives for you and give our whole being into your hands. And we ask you to help us to accomplish this as we go through life. And we thank you for the many ways you have led us, and just be with each one of us, and be with all the brothers everywhere. Strengthen them. Give us all clarity of mind and the ability to understand and take in these things that you send our way, in whatever way it may be. We thank you for the Lord Jesus and his willingness to teach us the way to eternal life. And we pray this in his worthy name. Amen. The subject I have today is one I've thought of for a few weeks already, maybe a month. And it's just another of these things that we can observe and see in ourselves and others, and in like a lot of things we can observe in one another and help one another see ourselves if we can. And it is the thought I had was about being offended. And how often are we offended? We can be offended at Christ. We can be offended at God. We can be offended at people, our brothers and sisters. And we take offense. I discovered the translations got a little differences in this word. So I'm not sure where all it goes to, but some other words are like stumble and instead of offense. But my thought is of be getting agitated, or can't bear when somebody rebukes us and we become offended. We feel bad. It's mostly my thought about this. But if we offend somebody and it causes them to stumble, this is also a great offense, but it's not really the one I'm thinking about as much. Um, so in Matthew 11 would be my beginning verse. It will start in John heard that when John was in prison and he heard that the Messiah was doing, he sent disciples to him and asked this question. He had already baptized him in the river Jordan. He had seen this dove come down and alight on him. But now he's in prison, and I can imagine in prison it could be tough to it just could be tough. So he was questioning. He sent his disciples. He was able at least to do that. Send his disciples. Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another? And Jesus answered. This is in verse 3 and now 4. Jesus answered them, go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have the good news brought to them. And verse 6, blessed is the one who takes no offense at me. We know that most people were offended at Jesus. I think simply because they loved darkness rather than light. And maybe some other causes too. But I think that would have been the big thing. He reproved people of sin. He taught them the way to eternal life. But most people took offense. One time, he said, you have to drink my blood. Maybe I'd have to look it up and eat my flesh. And they said, this is a hard saying. And sounds like nearly everybody left. I guess he doesn't really give a number. Maybe it does. But and he asked his disciples, are you going to leave us too? And Peter said, where would we go? You have the words to eternal life. And this is a great consolation to me. We can, when we're plagued with doubts and we get buffeted from people and maybe hardships perhaps, and we can always think that Jesus is the way to eternal life. His ways are the only way there. And we can take consolation in that. In chapter 13 of Matthew, he was being questioned again in verse 55. They were saying, is he not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? Are not his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And are not all of his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all this? And they took offense at him. It's amazing to me that people take offense when somebody does good. Jesus never hurt anybody that I know of. He healed perhaps thousands of people. But for some reason, it caused an offense. I was thinking how in the Old Testament, we have these people too that took offense. Cain took offense of God, or maybe even Abel himself. It seemed like God didn't accept his sacrifice, and he just took it out on Abel. But I also had thoughts that maybe Abel had communicated some stuff with him too, like maybe tried to encourage him and told him, this attitude you have may be bad, and I don't know. I find it a little difficult to think that he just seen that God accepted Abel's sacrifice and he didn't accept his, and then he got so angry at Abel. But maybe. But I just wonder if maybe they had some communications too. And more directly, like, you just think you're better than everybody else, or better than a few other people, I guess, at that time. I don't know what all conspired, but I think Abel was offended. Cain was offended. And did not God just told him in plain words. He said, if you do well, aren't you accepted? But if you don't do well, sin lies at your door. But you need to rule over it. But Cain would not accept that. I also had to think of Joseph, and there's probably many, many places. But I marvel at how it seems like he did not become offended at his brothers. His brothers became offended at him. So I guess we got both examples there. When you become offended, I think you lose something that can take you on into life, and you can be victorious. It seems like Joseph just kept trusting God. He just wouldn't give up trusting God. And his brothers, on the other hand, ended up also like Cain. They were quite willing to take his life, but God prevented it. And because of this great offense his brothers did against him, he ended up in jail. He ended up a slave. Ended up in jail after that because of some more righteous acts. So it's not a new thing that we have to face persecution for doing right. If we walk in the truth and in the light, as situations come up in our lives, people have suffered persecution for many, many, many years for doing right, for doing justice, for serving God, for doing His will. So there's an example on both sides of what it leads to when we become offended, when we can't take reproof. And this is just for myself as much as anybody. On the other hand, how we can be victorious if we don't allow ourselves to be offended. It just seems to me like Joseph bloomed being a slave. He bloomed being in prison and a slave. And as God had it for him, he became second in power over all of Egypt. I've often wondered, he had the ability and the power to go visit his dad, but he wouldn't. His brothers, but he didn't. And I think the Bible's quiet on why he didn't, but I have wondered about that. But the time came when they came back together again. In Matthew 15:12, the disciples approached him and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees took offense when they heard what you said?" It's just more of the same. Matthew 17:27. This would be a little different offense, I guess. He said they were supposed to pay taxes, and I think it might be a good reminder for us too, not to cheat on our taxes. I'm sure none of us would want to, but it becomes easy to be influenced by what's around us, and I grew up kind of with the idea that the government is rich, or for some, I'm not sure where it came from. I don't remember my parents having that attitude, but it seemed like the idea was they're rich enough, or they don't use it rightly, or all the excuses we can make. It seems like in me it was kind of like, they really don't deserve that, but we were taught to pay our taxes. But there's kind of a conflict there. I don't remember intentionally ever cheating with taxes. But maybe we wouldn't recognize it if we did. Like we make an excuse. I've noticed this in my children. I've noticed it in other people. And probably other people notice it in me. But when we make an excuse, we no longer bind ourselves to that, whatever it is that we've been told or taught. And we may not well understand that we have transgressed or that we have stolen from the government. If we this dollar, what does it matter? It hardly matters. I've thought already of how people shoplift all the time. I've heard of figures of like 10% is what they carry out of stores. And Walmart's big, they're powerful, they kind of cheat the people, no wages and this and that, and we just get a bad attitude about different things that cause us to make different discernments about taking advantage, when we end up taking advantage of people, even for $1 or $2. We wouldn't go pick something up at Walmart, but what if we have the attitude even of like they're just big and powerful and take advantage of people? I'm not sure how that all comes out, but I think we need to be careful what kind of attitudes we have in our minds. So here in Matthew 17:27, he said, well, so they don't give offense, they're going to pay their taxes. And he told them to cast a hook, and the first fish that comes up, when you open his mouth, you'll find a coin and go pay the taxes. I think God is also able to help us pay taxes in the same way. Maybe not with a fish, but we don't need to try and it won't be to our advantage to not pay our taxes. I tend to have more the idea I want to give it more freely, like have that attitude that instead of, I guess it's kind of a greedy attitude, I think. Like, and maybe nobody else ever had any of these thoughts, I don't know, but it's, I just personally want to be able to even be, not just being honest about it, but actually being free in mind and heart, that it does not, that it wouldn't even happen accidentally anymore. Like, you be that honest in mind. I think in Mark Mark 6:3. I think Jesus again. Same thing we had in Matthew. The people thought, they know this man. He's not such an important man. He shouldn't be doing these great things. And where does he get it from? And don't we know our whole family? No, they didn't. They didn't know his family at all. Where he come from, they didn't recognize. But he did say a prophet is not without honor except in his own hometown. There's something about people when you know them. Maybe this is why in families the true colors are more evident. Maybe, I'm pretty sure this would be a general thing. Then when we're out somewhere with other families, there can be a big difference. I think we need to try and minimize that difference and be at home just like we are anywhere else. God knows us as we are, not as we'd like to be. Or that's also a great reminder for me. Luke 7:23. This is again in answer to John's disciples when they came asking him. And in verse 23 it says, "And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." So this is highly important that we do not take offense at Christ. He's the door to the sheepfold. He has the ways to eternal life. He has the truth. He has all righteousness. If we take offense at him and his ways, we're not going to be none of his. I'm not sure I wrote it down, but I'll leave that and go to First Thessalonians. I didn't put down which chapter do you read, Leroy? 4. I was just thinking about the different aspects that we can challenge one another, and we need to be cautious, and we need to be gentle, kind in our interactions with one another, because people might even take offense at our forwardness, if you will. I'm not saying it's always bad, but there's sometimes we can act in such a way that causes people to stumble even before they hear a message. And so we need to be careful about that too. But at the same time, how free can we be with each other and not get offended? When Christ gives us teachings, and we share that with somebody, and somebody says, "Oh, that's nothing," or they curse us for it, I don't really feel offended myself because it's not been my words. It's not even my idea. I just share what Christ shared. But if I think there's other ways we can help one another. I think Atlee brought out about a tractor, equipment, or maybe not so much equipment, but I had to think, well, what if my grandchildren would look at my bus and say, oh, this is such a great thing to have and look at, and it just makes sense. But I understand, like locomotives and even like the John Deere tractors, they have a special, unique, something that has not been before or after them. It's just some pieces of equipment have that tendency a lot more than others. And depending what you collect them for, ends up being another thing. But like a steam engine chugging up a hill, I like that. I don't think I have to honor that or be my God, but I like that. I like the whistle. It's all gone. I don't think I need to idolize that. I don't like there's some locomotives now that have a fairly nice ring to their whistle, but the motors themselves, you don't hear hardly at all. All you hear is kind of the rattle, and some of those inventions were a little more that way, and I don't think we should be collecting them. I don't think we should spend a whole lot of time with them even. And if we like it too much, it becomes an idol. That's all there's to it. There's a point in all these things. But I just appreciate those challenges because when we start collecting and I don't think I by nature perhaps do that a whole lot. I have a brother, he just likes to collect and all kinds of stuff. And this is one of his interests, to go places and just a lot of different things that he, and it's just like Atlee mentioned that there's a connection to something that is dear to their heart and becomes could be one of the main things that are spoken about Sundays, could be when they get together or such like. The interest is not for serving our King, learning of his ways, dying to all this, all these worldly things. Another thought I had about a tractor was that one time our grandfathers might have used that tractor and it might have been anything to him at all. And then it becomes a great thing to us for some reason. I tend to think that thing about the bus, that right now I can't imagine anybody putting that thing into a building and trying to, venerate it, if you will. But maybe it'll be very special in 70 years or something. I don't know how that could happen. Some of the more modern things seems like they're not apt to happen that way. A lot of the stuff we have today is like disposable and throw away, and I can't imagine some of these things becoming collector's items. But the things that do are the things that become dear to our heart. We want the Lord dear in our heart. I think we can observe his creation, his beauty, and his glory, and I think we can be rejoicing in the life that we have. And so I was just thinking, do we become offended if, I can't find it right now, it's somewhere, I think in chapter 4 about working with our hands, and what somebody would become offended if I'd say we need to work with our hands. Or would become offended if I'd say, sell all that you have and give to the poor and come follow me. There's just these very challenging verses that I have to deal with, have to deal with, and I can't really find, to me, I can't really find just putting down a standard for this verse and apply it to myself and maybe push it on other people. But it's a verse that I think we need to take serious, that not just those verses, but many, many other verses. That is in Mark 10, 21. That's talking about the young man. So I find myself put in the balance, if that makes any sense, in attention, like sometimes leaning more this way and sometimes leaning more that way. And I don't think Jesus is making a law that we have to sell everything, including the clothes off our back. But however, if it's the same thing again, if we cling to it, if it becomes our idol, if we're willing to use it rightfully, righteously, and holy, then it becomes our idol, and we will be destroyed by it. So when Jesus said these things, it doesn't say that the young man got offended, but he turned away. He couldn't do it. And we could do the same. We don't have to become offended to not do the will of Christ. In Luke 12:32, I'm not sure, I didn't read the rest of it, but he just starts with, "Do not be afraid, little flock, for it's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." We have God on our side if we can be humble before Him. It's His good pleasure to give us the kingdom. In verse 33, He says, "Sell your possession and give alms, make purses for yourself that do not wear out, or an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So again, the things we treasure. This is the challenge that we can maybe challenge one another when we see somebody having a treasure. In many different ways, it can be, it's not always in things that we treasure. We treasure antiques. I guess we could treasure antiques and not even own them. maybe even keep it hidden. There's so many ways we can hide ourselves, and we're not willing to bring it to the light. So I think we do well to help one another. We will have a short life. It won't be long. So if we have a treasure, if we can have our treasures in heaven, that's where we, probably most of us, plan to go. We would hope to go. But while we're here on earth, we have ways of putting treasures in heaven. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. So if we trust safely in the Lord, follow His ways, He won't let us down. It's the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. In Luke 14, there's another verse that 26. There were like large crowds. In verse 25, traveling with him, he turned and said to them, whoever comes to me and does not hate father, mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters, yes, even life itself cannot be my disciple. This is another one of these great challenges to me. He won't even disciple us unless we forsake all. Even our own life, like does not hate. There's some that say that shouldn't be hate, but it seems like most translations I find do use hate. I'm not sure. I don't think it means like having a bad feeling toward people. But if somebody counsels us in a way opposite of the kingdom of God, we need to hate that. We need to resist that. We need to stay away from it. And it can be our father, and it can be our mother, and it can be our brothers and sisters and children. And even our life itself begs sometimes to have its own way. Are we offended when Jesus says these things? I'm just bringing out a few points. There could be many, many more. And there's this other subject, maybe more between brothers and sisters, and how easily we become offended, seemingly. And somebody says something, and we just take offense. Maybe not even what that person meant, and we don't try to find out for sure. And sometimes people do try to find out for sure, and there's still somehow an offense there. And the people that get offended, is this great harm that comes to them by being offended. I thought also of King David. He was like the shepherd boy. He had been anointed already by Samuel to be king, but I don't think he knew what God had in mind for him. He probably accepted the fact that God's going to place him in the kingdom sometime. I wouldn't doubt that just because of the great faith he had in God. But I don't think he knew how it's going to happen. Like we don't know either what's going to happen in our lives anymore. So this Goliath was out there from the Philistine army. And the deal was that one person would come fight Goliath. And whoever wins, the other side gives up. I'm not sure how that can work out if the others wanted to fight yet, but it seems like it kind of works that way. I can't remember how long this went on, but for quite a while. And David's father sent him out with maybe bread and food, and also to find out how the war was going with the Philistines. And when he came there, he's seeing this Philistine, and he started inquiring about it. And his brothers immediately derided him. But it did not bother him, seemingly. He brushed it off. He did not allow that infectious disease to get into him. And I'm always thinking of applying these things to myself or to whoever, to ourselves. That we don't allow this infectious disease to start eating us up. Not much came out of that, in a sense. Other than if he would have taken great offense, I think it may have turned out differently. But because he was a man of God and a person that would not, he had a zeal and a goal in mind, and he was not going to be deterred. So if his brothers even tried to offend him, he didn't take it. This is an example for us. We need to be strong and not being offended. I guess even between children and parents and between husband and wife, people can take offense and not be able to work things out anymore. And there's this scripture, I think in Proverbs, it says that it's harder to win I may not be quoting it exactly right, but it's harder to win a brother offended than a strong city. This is why we do need to be as careful as we can be not to offend somebody or cause them to struggle or stumble. But if nobody gets offended, if we're strong enough, then we can talk. We can always talk. I also think after David was with Saul's army, and he ended up making Saul jealous because he was righteous, he was good, he did the right things. And now Saul, the king himself, was jealous, even though David was doing more good for him than all the rest of the people put together. Kind of like Christ. He was doing good more than all people put together, but people were offended. Anyways, I admire his character here again for an example for us. Saul was out running David all over the country. He fled into the wilderness and into caves, and Saul was trying to track him down, and the Lord allowed it that at least twice that David could have killed Saul and taken the kingdom. But it seems like David, he just said he's not going to touch the Lord's anointed. That was his stand. God was going to kill Saul himself or had him killed somehow. David was not going to do it. He would not allow his men to do it. This is a character that is very, very noble. A very good example for us to follow. There was one time when David did get offended, and probably maybe other times too, but they had been out in the hills and they had guarded somebody's sheep, Nabal's sheep, or not necessarily guarded them, but because David was there, the bandits couldn't be there, and David didn't steal from him, so his sheep were protected just by being David and his men being there. And if I got this right, he was hungry one time and he asked maybe for some sheep, and he thought it would be fair that Nabal would give him some sheep or some food. And Nabal denied him. And that time, David sinned. He said he sinned. And he became upset. He became offended. I think it was Abigail. She had wisdom. It was Nabal's wife. And she got a whole bunch of bread ready and a whole bunch of food, whatever it was, and went and met David and pled for the life of her husband, maybe. Even though Nabal means fool. He was a fool. And David repented and said he has sinned. And this is also noble. Scripture says that the righteous man falleth 7 times, but he rises back up. So David fell that time and sinned. But he rose back up. He went back home. That character is worth pursuing. So there's an offense against God, there's an offense against Jesus, and then there's offenses against each other that can cause us to stay out of the kingdom of heaven. And there's some more examples of people that I look as being very noble. The woman that came and wanted, can't remember quite, was her daughter to be healed, and Jesus told her, it's not right to take the things from the children and give it to the dogs, and she said, but Lord, the dogs do get the crumbs though, and she just humbled herself before the master that way, and Jesus commended her as having great faith. That, I think, would have been a hard thing to take, but she took no offense. I think, is it because she had a heavenly view she had faith? She had faith something beyond the words. I kind of had an experience like that one time, quite a few years ago. Nobody ever done that before or after to me, I don't think, but this man kind of ended up calling me like a dog, snooping around there. And the only time in my life I had to restrain my hand not to hit somebody. I don't know, I just felt like hitting him. And to my shame, but it was just like I hadn't thought about connecting those two thoughts together ever before, but I could have just humbly accepted it and not felt any of that, but I don't remember ever before or after feeling like, well, maybe some here and there. I felt like hitting somebody, but that time I just felt like I almost had to restrain my arm not to move, and But I don't think I hold anything against the man. He never knew it, I don't think. I didn't move. But God knew. I knew. I find it kind of interesting. I came across an article that somebody wrote just last week, and I have been thinking about this subject, and it started out with being offended, and this is another man's thoughts, not necessarily how I would exactly think, but I think we can get the message. Just a thought, as I stop and listen to everyone today, it seems that everyone is offended over any little thing, even the smallest matters. Everyone thinks it's very popular to defend the weak, even if the weak is morally wrong. Don't get me wrong, I don't think that any of us have a right to be mean or purposely hurt anyone's feelings. But then again, this is going to ridiculous proportions. Women are offended if you open the door for them. Black people are offended if you use cotton in a decoration. Left-handed people are offended at the right-handed people. People that are living in open sin are offended if you point out their sins, that their sins are against God. Transgenders are offended if you tell them they can't go into the little girl's bathroom. And someone who makes straight F's on the report card fails are offended because they're not promoted to the next grade level. We need to get real. We need to get real, and everyone doesn't pass to the next grade level. And yes, not everyone gets a trophy. Everyone seems to be offended. The bottom line is we need to toughen up this. We need to toughen up. This is getting ridiculous. Men need to stand up and be men. Women need to stand up and be women, and not be offended over every little thing that doesn't go our way. Jesus said, "Blessed is he that is not offended in me." And that comes from God, from a God that has every right to be offended. People need to wisen up, smarten up, toughen up, and take up your bed and walk. Some of that I wouldn't word that way, but the point is, there just seems like a lot of offense does go around. And does great harm. And not only the ones we offend, but if we become offended ourselves, it seems like we lose our reason or something. And causes us to stumble. And we become like Cain instead of like Abel. And we become like Joseph's brothers that wanted to kill instead of being righteous and a person that helps others. We need to be the giver, not the one that falls. I guess I don't have much more to say, but just that I think we probably can think of many people in our lives that became offended, and some have turned completely away from God. Others have taken offense and are willing to make divisions where they ought not be. And I maybe had one thought about maybe a kind of a solution, like if we can have humility. It's a big a big shield against becoming offended. If we think we're something, is usually the problem to becoming offended. But if we have humility, I think that's what helped Christ through his battles was humility, one of them. And he showed us the way. He became humble, became like man. So I guess my hope would be that we can have humility and be able to help one another in not only taking offense, but also being able to correct problems that are in our lives. And at the same time, people will take offense. We cannot avoid it either. So just because somebody does become offended wouldn't mean that we're wrong. But for us, for ourselves, we have no excuse to become offended in those ways. I think maybe in other ways we could become offended righteously. But I'm not going to try to explain that, I guess. But let's be strong. Just feel free to share.
Thank you, Brother Walter. Mind spinning for a lot of verses with offense. Of course, the Beatitude would be one of the top. Blessed are those when they say bad things about you in the Bible, but his name's sake, my name's sake. And I wonder if the man who wrote that little article, if he was offended. I was trying to get into this article. I guess he's been offended. That's why he's writing that article. It's not a hard thing. He's offended because everyone's victim, so. But it had a good message to it, I guess. I think of Shimei, when David was talking about David, when he was going walks, and we all know the basic story. When Shimei was going walks, David, let alone, he took it. It was a great influence on Abishai and all the others. Let him curse him, let him throw rocks at him. And I think when Jesus was before Pilate, I was reading John 19 the other day, how they were hailing insults at him left and right. And Jesus was quiet as a mouse. He didn't say anything. And it said that Pilate mouthed him. Said, don't you have anything to say? He didn't. As the Hebrew writer said, fix your eyes on Jesus. When he reviled and reproached, he didn't give back. And what an example that is for us. That he had such an influence in Pilate that Pilate washed his hands and said, hey, to envy they delivered up, and I put no guilt to this guy, no guilt to him. But if we have that self-control, which I don't have, and I'm working on, to be like that, it is so, Christ-like to self. As you preached, as you said, Brother Walter, that's the example. And praise the Lord that you didn't slap that guy that tempted you. I remember there was that one guy at Springfield once. He had that cigarette butt. He was getting real close to my eye, and I wanted to knock it away, just knock the cigarette away from him, but I didn't. But he was real close to my eye with that cigarette butt. And, the example is, God can give me a new eye, if he kills me too. The Lord be magnified.
So I was thinking of that word, like offended, to be offended. I guess this wrong attitude that one has when they recognize that an offense has been committed against them. And so we should posture ourselves in such a way that people you can't commit an offense against us, like so like somebody can do something that's not right or that you disagree with, but it's not necessarily a crime, like there like there's federal offenses, maybe things that aren't good to do or aren't nice to do, but it's not necessarily a crime. And so, like when people are like overly sensitive, they behave as though a crime has been committed against them when no crime has been committed. But if we posture ourselves properly, then we become unoffendable. Like, no, if I either, like, just through the type of humility of just the wrong things that I've done, or what a recognition of what I deserve. There's nothing anybody can do to me that's worse than what I deserve. I still wouldn't. I'd still be getting a great deal for settling for all my debts. If we recognize that our possessions are the Lord's, then really nobody can steal from me. If my whole life is all the Lord's, nobody can. If they're doing anything, they're doing it against Him, but not me. If I posture myself properly. So like esteeming others better than ourselves. So one way is through having a humble view of ourselves, and the other way is having an exalted view of others. Like when the Lord offended people with the things that He said, if our attitude toward Him is, if we esteem Him so highly that we ultimately say He can say no wrong. There's nothing He can say that is wrong, because He's the Lord. He's the biggest. He's the best. He's God. Whatever He says is. If He says I'm a dog, He has done no wrong. If He takes my life, He's done no wrong. If He says eat His flesh, drink His blood, so it was like He was pushing their ability to say, like, okay, He says this, well, He's Messiah. He says this, oh boy, He said that. Okay, now he's gone too far. So, like, toward God, it's like an estimation of Him that there's no such thing as Him going too far. He can't ask too much. He can't require too much. He can't do anything that we don't understand or that we don't agree with. Like we say, no matter, I just must not see. If there's something I feel like is wrong that He's doing, it's me. The issue is on my part, because He can do no wrong. And obviously we can't have that same posture toward our fellow man entirely, but like something in that, exercising our hearts like in that direction. I was thinking of when Walter talked about David and Saul, like the reverence and respect that David had for Saul is the same type of reverence and respect that we should have for all men. We shouldn't desire that any man should die, though, or be punished for his offenses, but rather long for their repentance, even if we suffer in the meantime. There's this man I love named Burton, and I can't quite say he could do no wrong, but he's way in that direction. Like, he's done me so much good and shown me so much love that any oversight he would have toward me or something, like, I couldn't possibly feel offended, even if he did supposedly do something disrespectful or something to me. And so, like, one way that I've exercised myself before is like in traffic, sometimes people would do things that are inconsiderate, and if I'm being impatient or something, I think negatively about somebody when I'm driving, and then some. So this thing I'll do is I'll be like, well, what if that was Burton? And like somebody cut me off, what if that was, that person, that was so wrong what they just did. And then I thought, well, what if it was Burton? I'd be like, oh, I'm glad he got the better parking spot, or I'm glad he was able to get in there in time, or I'm sure he was just distracted. Like I would just do whatever I could to try to justify whatever thing he did because of my love for him. And I should try to have that same kind of love for my fellow man, and even those who would be called an enemy, who would do me wrong, to long for their repentance and for good to come to them, and not recognize, like, how can you hear what that guy said about you, or that guy just took your stuff, or did something wrong to you? Just like, well, like he can't hurt me. Like I don't deserve better, or something like that.
I didn't really have any comments. I just more or less had a question about offense. It seems like maybe sometimes in scriptures there are different ways that people are offended. Like there's the way that Walter was talking about when he felt like striking somebody. That's an offense. But then there's also an offense where maybe there's a truth that is just too difficult. It's not necessarily that anybody's angry or upset. They're just not able to stomach or swallow the ramifications for that truth. I just wonder, Walter, if as you were researching things, if you seemed to think that there were maybe, you mentioned at the very beginning there were different words to be used for offense, and I wondered if maybe you thought in your research of offense that there were different kinds of being offended.
You're asking for the research?
If you think there are different kinds of offense.
I should know there's different translations. I could say stumble instead of offense. And I didn't have time to research it, so I don't know what, I'm not sure. Somebody else may have looked at it and researched it. They can mean the same thing. It seems like it's off a little different twist to it too.
Might be close to what you're asking, but I thought like how the truth offends someone, or like Jesus' teachings offending someone, because of there's implications. Like if you talk to someone about the legitimacy of their like God's definition of what marriage is and what adultery is, you might be you're accusing them. You could possibly be accusing someone of committing the implication is that you're saying God is saying that you're committing adultery, or the way you handle your money, God says it's wrong. The way you do this, God says. So there's like these the offense is in the implication that you're charging them with a crime, or I guess the crime would be a false accusation. They'd think that you're falsely. Like that guy said my marriage is adultery. That guy said my riches that I worked for are wrong. That guy said defending people with violence is wrong. That like my time in the service was wrong. Like, so the offense is that you have false. Obviously, they don't think that they're wrong, and so you falsely accuse them. So like any teaching of truth that would go against someone, again, so like this recognition of just like, well, God can say that man Jesus, if I esteem him properly, I say he can say no wrong, and any philosophy or teaching that he would have must be even if it's contrary to my life. Anyway, I don't know if that partly.
I don't know if this, I think it ties into what the question that's being asked. I've thought of how offenses, like somebody can be offended. Okay, so somebody's maybe going into the bar to drink, and I could rebuke him for it and tell him that this is sinful for him to do this thing, and he could feel offended. He could take it as an offense, or I could take a different approach, and instead of hurting his feelings or making him feel uncomfortable, I could go in with him and sit down beside him and drink with him and hope that an opportunity comes up that I can, ask him how his heart is or something. But in the eyes of God, in which scenario have I caused this man to stumble most likely? And that's the offense that I think, that the one where I would actually cause this man to stumble by giving him the impression that what he's doing is okay. I just want to be a good friend to him and not cause him to think ill of drinking. That's the kind of offense that I think Jesus would have been talking about when he said it'd be better if there was a millstone hung around my neck and I was cast into the sea. At the same time, and I feel like this is what Walter was talking quite a bit about, is how we still, that doesn't take away that I should take every care, that I be as like with the words that I would use to reprove him or rebuke him or warn him, that I don't, I think maybe Walter mentioned this, like have some kind of an air about me that he's already offended at me or my attitude, or maybe he feels like maybe wrongly, but maybe rightly, like he feels this, like I'm up, you're up here, you're up there, I'm down here kind of thing, and he just is offended by a wrong attitude that I have, and we can have that. Kind of reminds me also, you read that list, Walter, of this guy that says, how everybody's offended by everything. It's time to toughen up. It's time for, and it kind of reminded me of what circulated here maybe a couple of years ago about, there were some people we were acquainted with who were saying that you got to have alligator skin. Okay, maybe some truth into that, but that doesn't mean that we need alligator teeth. And so, those are just things that we need to keep in mind. I found it interesting here. I thought of this verse in Psalms. I've known this verse for a long time. In the King James it says, great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. I always took that to mean like somebody that loves the law is a person that doesn't easily get offended by anything, anyone. Basically it says nothing shall offend them, and maybe it means that, but I read it here in the Septuagint, and it gave me a little bit of a different impression. It says, great peace have all who love your law, and it is not an offense to them. It seems like the it is talking about the law. So if we love his law, if we love his word, there's nothing in it that will offend us. Links into with what Buddy was trying to point out, I think, with like, even if we come across it and it's just hard, or we don't even understand it, or it's rightly there. we have nothing to say against it. I had one other thought. It's kind of a side. It's kind of beside the point of what the message was about. But Walter made me think of it when he was talking about David and Goliath and how the one who gives up, the one who loses this battle, this duel, the others give up. And he just said something like, they wouldn't have had to if they'd had a will to fight. And it just made me think, like, Goliath was their champion. So they had their stock in him. And if he fell, they were ready to give up. They were ready to give in. And how much that is like people, when people follow a man, when people follow a cult leader or a certain person with a certain character, once that man's gone, the movement usually crumbles. And even whoever it was there in the book of Acts recognized that, and his counsel was to let that this movement that they were worried about, if it's not from God, it'll crumble. Look at all these men who have rose up and had followings, and once the man died, nothing happened. Anyway, with that, I just thought how, like, even in the Christian realm, like if Jesus is not that champion, if he's not the one who we are following, and instead we make some man with a certain character or certain message our man, we're going to give up before we get to the end of our life, because that man's going to die or something's going to happen likely, and we're going to give up like the Philistines did.
Just one quick thought I had, that a lot of the hard things that Jesus calls us to, obviously there's variation amongst us just in our fleshly nature, how hard a particular thing might be. Some people find one thing more challenging, some people find another thing more challenging. And I think, when I think of being offended in the sense that you were talking about it, Walter, just I think, that's probably not one of my biggest struggles, but I think that it's always easy to see things in the extreme. It's always easy to see, like, okay, I'm not the kind of person who just gets angry at everybody every time they say something that might be taken slightly offensive way or corrects me or something like that. And yet these things can have pretty subtle can manifest themselves pretty subtly. Even the story you told about David, as he was fleeing, and there's this man up there who's his subject, really, calling him names and throwing stones at him, or being abusive. And it is pretty remarkable that he just had the peace and the strength of character to just let him go. And yet, as he was on his deathbed giving instructions to Solomon, he said, "Don't forget that man. Make sure he doesn't go down with gray hair to the grave." And how many years was that this had happened? I mean, lots of things had probably happened to David since that man stood there and called him names, and yet he still, as an old man, he still remembered it, and he still wanted to make sure that he was keeping good his promise to God that he would not shed that man's blood, but he wanted Solomon to make sure he got taken care of. And even a godly man like that, at the very end of his life, is still struggling with an offense that happened maybe decades ago. I don't know how long it was between those two events, but we can see from the other examples you gave, David doesn't seem to be a man who's easily taken to being offended. How he treated Saul, or when when he took Bathsheba, and he was confronted by the prophet that it kind of tricked by the prophet. He told him a story about this man and lambs, and he could have gotten really offended at that. And you got me into a trap. You told me this story, and you knew all the time it was about me, and you didn't tell me until I already gave my judgment on it. And yet he didn't. He just humbled himself, and he was the king over this prophet, and yet he was just willing to say, "You're right. I was wrong. I'm going to repent." And so, even a man like that, still as an old man with a lot of experience, on his deathbed, is still struggling with offense. So even for those of us who may not see that as a primary problem that we have to deal with in our life, just because of our personality or whatever reason, the devil has ways to subtly get in there and get at us even when we don't expect it.
Yeah, I appreciate being here today and hearing the things that we were taught, and I confess that I still have things to learn about being offended and things, but I can also say I learned a lot of things. Like if I get offended, or when I get offended, I shouldn't, but if I do, the only way to not hurt myself is to, or in other words, if I take an offense of something, I'm just hurting myself. I'm not hurting the other person. It's for me. Life is like, we make out of it, we're responsible for our own soul. I don't know how to say this, but it's our choice, regardless. And sometimes it does us good to get hurt or knocked down for that very sake that we recognize who we are. And that's why it's so important to humble ourselves and to remember that we are accountable. I am accountable for my own situation. On our travelings here, we went to a place for the night, and it was some of our relatives, and we walked in the house, and they had it decorated up for this holiday that's coming up, or that is in the process, and they had it decorated up in their house, and I really struggled not getting offended. It just hit me. But the day went on and we went to bed, and I didn't sleep very much. I just asked the Lord, please, somehow that I would have a message for him or talk to him without getting offended, and the Lord helped me. The next day, and before we left, we were at the table and finished eating there and sitting there and visiting, and I said to him, these declarations in the house reminded me of an experience of ours, I said, that we had in Pennsylvania before we moved out of this Christmas thing, what they called December 25th. What we experienced, and I said we moved to Rosebush, and here one of the brothers on December 25th was out in the cornfield picking corn. Whoa, that was just like, I was never taught anything like that. You keep that day holy and on and on. And that very thing made me, I told him this very thing made me go get the encyclopedia and look what this is about, this what they call Christmas Day, or this 25th, what this is about. And I told him what it said and how commercial or pagan this thing is of what they're doing and decorating up all these trees and buying these things and on. And making a story short, they said they never knew about it. They didn't know it, that it's what this is really all about. And it ended up being, I think it was beneficial to them that I shared our testimony of what we experienced in this, and that we don't want to bring Christ in something like this. We want to try to keep him out of it instead of bringing Christ into Christmas like some people say. And then I told him about the man that wrote in the budget about he was offended because people call it Xmas. He thinks they shouldn't do that, and I said, praise the Lord that they call it Xmas. And they understood what I was saying by the time I was done talking to them, and I think they learned something too about this commercialized day of December 25th. But anyway, so much for that. We had a good trip and meeting people and trying to be a witness for the Lord as we went. So may the Lord have his way in our hearts.
Not by the name of Chris River, was it?
No.
Oh, amen.
No. It was my nephew, actually.
Oh, you?
Yeah. It was my nephew. Yeah. We went there to visit him, and it was just like setback. I mean, they didn't grow up like that, I mean, commercialized, but they want to try to bring Christ in with it and make it, yeah. And by the way, I also met, I don't know if anybody knows Roger. If anybody knows Roger Hartzler, we were there for the night. I never met the man, but I got some gospel signs from him. He makes gospel signs and sends them all over. He's a big friend of my brother-in-law, Elmer Peachy. And Elmer said we should go visit him, and we happened to be in the area there in Sweet Home, Oregon, and we just went across the highway for the night to him and visited him. And so we had a long trip. The round we took till we got back, we had 5,700 miles on our vehicle, so yeah, put a lot of miles on.